So today we wanted to talk to you about Family First Prevention Services Act and what is New York's vision currently, and give you a little bit of a planning update as to where we are. So I am Renee Hallock, and I'm an associate commissioner within child welfare, and I oversee permanency, which includes foster care and adoption. I also oversee all of our preventive contracts that are primary prevention contracts. I also oversee the domestic violence services and adult protective services within child welfare. And I will hopefully at some point be joined by my colleagues, Gail Geohagen-Pratt, who's also an associate commissioner within child welfare, and she oversees the Office of Implementation and Accountability. And then Becky Colman, who is the director of our Bureau of Research, Evaluation, Performance Analytics, and Strategic Planning and Policy Development, will also be joining me today. So what we're hoping as a result of our presentation with everyone today is that you'll become a little more familiar with some of the federal requirements and really those associations that really come with the Family First Prevention Services Act. And then understand New York State's vision and actions for that we're going to be taking to transform child welfare services, with a particular focus on how these changes are going to impact adoptive families. And so I just received a quick email from my colleagues, and it seems like maybe they don't have the link for today. And so if you would just give me 1 second to let me send them this link. Okay. Okay, is everyone seeing the screen again? My apologies.
Yep.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what is the Family First Prevention Services Act. I'll give you a little background on that. So again, it was enacted in 2018, and what was really nice is it was a bipartisan budget act, which is always nice to hear. And really the whole intent around this particular legislation is the goal is to keep children safely at home. And of course, if that's not possible, if you do have to place a child into a more restrictive placement, it's going to be the least restrictive placement. And that needs to be really based on the child's need. And of course, on the state level, we have been doing a great deal of work with the local departments of social services on first looking for relatives, kinship placements, really helping to keep children connected to their families is the priority. We have set targets with the districts to try and get as many children placed with relatives. And hopefully these are going to be approved or certified foster care placements.
Oh, good.
And then the second part around the whole placement piece is the foster care. There are limits on the Title IV care and maintenance payments for child care institutions. So what are those child care institutions? That's what we call congregate care. It's those that include agency operated boarding homes, group residences, and institutions. This is a required element within Family First. And then the optional element is around prevention, which authorizes the use of Title E4 funds for certain types of prevention services. So this is optional. And what that means is you can't do the prevention services unless you're doing the foster care component. And the foster care component, we are going to be starting in September 29th, 2021. And then we will then look to put in the prevention plan once we get the foster care piece up and going. So we are looking at this point to really enhance what we've been doing around services that are linked to prevention services. And so you can see here the federal prevention plan has prioritized services that are related to community mental health services, parenting supports, and substance use treatment services. And again, the premise is by implementing these services with families in their own home, it will reduce the need for any child to be removed from their home. And if we're providing these community-based services, we can get federal reimbursement for those services. So just keep that in mind as we move forward. So what are we trying to do here in New York State is we're looking to have 50% or more of the children in foster care living with relatives or kin. And the definition of kin is not just a blood relative, but it's that person who has had some significant impact on that child's life. It could be a neighbor, it could be a coach, it really could even be a school teacher. Somebody can be considered a kin. And then the goal is also to reduce the number of children who are in institutional care down to 12% of all of our children in an institutional setting will be reduced. So what does that really mean if we really want to meet those goals? We would have to reduce the number of children in institutional or group care settings by 370 children. Now that is based on data as of 12/31/2020. And then we'd have to move 1,200 more children living with relatives to meet the targets that we've set. So yes, these are a lot of children, both leaving group home and being placed with relative. But we are seeing districts improving the number of children residing with relatives. We are seeing a very nice increase. And the number of children, I think you're going to start seeing the number of children in residential care start to come down as well. So you might ask the questions, okay, what are you going to do about those children who are in residential care? Where are they going to go? Some children will still need some type of therapeutic support. And so we are looking to expand the number of therapeutic foster homes. And so for those of you on today's call, some of you who may be therapeutic foster parents, or you might be asked to consider becoming a therapeutic foster home. So we really have worked a great deal to build lots of partnerships around the implementation of this Family First legislation. It's been a lot of work. We did take a 2-year delay in order for us to be able to plan this type of implementation. And in doing so, we have put together a statewide implementation team. And that includes, of course, a lot of people from OCFS. We have local districts on our team. We have voluntary agencies. We have staff from the Office of Court Administration, including some judges. We have consultants. We are closely working with Chapin Hall. And we have advocacy groups that include CAFCA. So that's a Council on Family Child Care Agencies, Casey Family Programs, and Redlick Horowitz Foundation. They've all been working very closely with us. And a lot of them have been providing technical support to both the local districts to get them prepared in implementing both the congregate care side of the legislation as well as the prevention services. And then you may know, a couple of years ago, we implemented a parent advisory board, which I think currently consists of 16 or 17 members, which include parents, foster parents, adoptive parents, and kinship caregivers. And we frequently talk with all of these individuals in the implementation of the Family First legislation. We have also provided planning supports to the districts, which include a workbook and data analysis tools, so they understand what does the data tell them. So we give them data about how many children are in these different levels of care, and what will it take to move them? How many, again, like we showed that the numbers have to move. So how many kids are in kinship homes? And we want them to use that data to determine what will it take for them to get below or above the targets. And so that information has been going out on a regular basis. And then we provided them with Family First transition funds that support kinship foster parents with approval and certification requirements, improve recruitment and retention of foster homes, including kin caregivers, enhance support for foster parents, and family search and engagement. All of those activities could be done using the Family First Transition Fund monies. And counties continue to utilize that money and really in preparation. And then we have technical assistance along with Redlick Horowitz gracious funding consultants, again, that work directly with counties in getting ready to implement Family First. So let me just ask and see if my colleagues have been able to join me. Is Gail able to join?
Yes, hi Renee, I'm
or
here.
Becky?
Gail is here.
Hi, can you hear
So
me?
Gail, if you want,
Yes.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay.
Gail, would you like me to continue moving the slides?
Sure, Renee, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Gail Geohagen-Pratt. I'm a colleague with Renee with OCFS within the Child Welfare Division, and we have been working collectively in regards to the implementation of Family First. So Renee has done a great job of providing an overview of the foundation of the Family First and the goals that OCFS has identified. And so what I'm going to provide an overview is in regards to the congregate care provision of the Family First legislation, known as the Qualified Residential Treatment Programs, or QRTPs for short. So with Family First, it creates this new program type setting known as a QRTP. And it is very prescriptive in terms of the requirements in order for a program to be a QRTP. It also creates QRTP exceptions, and there are 3 areas of these exceptions, which are the prenatal, postpartum, or parenting, known as PPP, also supervised settings where it expands our supervised independent living programs, our SOAP programs, and creates other settings where youth over the age of 18 are able to continue to live independently, as well as we have our commercially and sexually exploited children, their CSEC program. So those youth that are at risk or have been identified as trafficked youth. These are also the other 3 program areas known as QRTP exceptions that the legislation has created. One of the primary distinctions in terms of being a QRTP or QRTP exception program is if your program is not categorized as one of those, then you're known as what's called a non-specified program. And if you are non-specified, then it limits 4E reimbursement, maintenance payments for a maximum of 14 days if a child is placed in that program. So as agencies are preparing for Family First and taking into consideration whether or not they are going to be a QRTP or QRTP exception, that is definitely a lens that is being applied both by the agencies as well as the districts, recognizing that if a program does not have one of those designations of a QRTP or QRTP exception, then it does limit 4E reimbursement for a maximum of 14 days for children eligible that are placed in that non-specified program. And all of these provisions, as highlighted in red here, do take effect in New York State on September 29th, 21. You could go ahead, Renee. Thank you. So as I mentioned, the legislation is very specific in regards to what qualifies as a QRTP and what are the specific criteria that an agency must meet, a program must meet in order to become a QRTP. So Catherine, this is going to respond to your question. So first, the program must be accredited, and the legislation identified what are the accrediting bodies that a program could utilize in order to fulfill this requirement. So you see here listed, we have JCO, we have the COA, the Council on Accreditation, we have CARF, the Commission on Accreditation of Residential Facilities. These are the accrediting bodies that were identified within the legislation. It also does allow for other independent accrediting bodies that would need to be approved by DHHS. Additionally, a program must have a trauma-informed model. So they have to be able to demonstrate how their program and services are delivered in a trauma-informed way. And this needs to be operationalized. So it's not just about having an existing policy, but it's also about being able to demonstrate in the operationalizing of the services and programs, how the program is operated in a trauma-informed way, how are staff being trained, how is leadership demonstrating this, how are the services that are provided to children and families delivered in a trauma-informed and responsive manner. Additionally, there is a requirement for registered and clinical staff to be available 24/7. This is really to ensure that at any point in time that there is a need, a crisis need for a child, that there is the appropriate services through either nursing or clinical supports to be able to be responsive. Renee, you can go to the next one. Additionally, this is really trying to be comprehensive in terms of the services that are provided. So another requirement is in regards to facilitating family outreach and engagement. And this is really a very strengths-based approach, and it needs to really be implemented in a proactive and really substantive way that families are an integral part of the service planning and delivery and identifying of services to address the needs that may have brought that child to need a QRTP treatment. And so agencies, as they are developing their QRTP programs and policies, really need to speak to how they are going to facilitate family outreach and engagement, demonstrate how this will be diligent, and how really families will be centered in terms of planning and programs and services. Interrelated is discharge planning. So discharge planning begins on day one, because these are temporary. That's the approach, that this is not some place for the child to continue to be on an ongoing basis, but this is really a temporary intervention. So from day one, when a child is placed in the QRTP, there is a proactively looking at discharge planning. What are those programs and services? What are those treatment needs that they are receiving? And how does this and how are we looking at also planning for discharge, and what may be those programs, those supports, those wraparound services that would help to transition that child from the congregate care setting, whether they're stepping down or returning to their community. And this is really about a wraparound and comprehensive and integrated approach. So that child's parents, caretakers, relatives, kinship resources, the permanency team, mental health providers. This is really a comprehensive approach in regards to developing a discharge plan. And then the other requirement is that the congregate care, the QRTPs must provide 6 months of aftercare support up on discharge. And just want to distinguish that this requirement is even if the child steps down from a QRTP into a family-based setting, such as a therapeutic foster home or a kinship home, that the QRTP is still required to provide this 6 months of aftercare support. And this again is really about how are we supporting that transition? How are we providing the needed services and supports to stabilize and really mitigate against that child having to either re-enter or step back up into a higher level of care. And so this is about providing the services for the youth as well as the family to really support their being able to successfully, transition either back home or to be able to step down into a lower level of care. So in order for a child to be in a QRTP, it requires that there is a 30-day assessment that is facilitated by a qualified individual or a QI. For New York State, we have identified 2 assessment tools that the QI can utilize, either the CANS, the Child and Adolescent Needs and Strengths, or the CASI, the Child and Adolescent Services Intensity Instrument, or the CASI. So this is one of the 2 functional behavioral assessment tools that a qualified individual can utilize in doing that assessment. That assessment, when a child is placed in a QRTP, must occur within 30 days of that placement. Otherwise, it impacts 4E reimbursement while that child for that QRTP placement.
Gail, I think for some reason I skipped a couple. Hold on, let me just make sure. I missed this one on you. I'm sorry.
Okay. Oh, no, that's fine. So for the qualified individual that facilitates this 30-day assessment, we have set the framework for who can be the qualified individual. And what New York State has identified is that this person will be a licensed clinician, so they'll hold a valid New York State license, and we have identified a number of disciplines in which they can hold a valid license. So they could be a licensed mental health counselor, a licensed master social worker, licensed clinical social worker. We have marriage counselors, registered nurses, physicians, psychiatrists. So it's very broad and comprehensive because we wanted to also apply the lens of meeting capacity and really being able to have a wide pool to be able to facilitate this role. In addition to those disciplines in which they can hold a clinical license, we're also wanted to have a table setting of at least a minimum of 2 years of child welfare experience, you know, realizing that the work that is facilitated by the QI and the decision-making that is happening, that having someone having some foundation and grounding in the child welfare really lends itself to the work that needs to be facilitated. As part of the qualified individual, OCFS did issue a letter of interest, an LOI, and we were able to curate a list of individuals as well as agencies that met the criteria, and that list was provided to both the agencies as well as the local districts. What I want to highlight about that 30-day assessment that the QI is facilitating is that they're not doing it in isolation. So this really is about comprehensively how the QI is utilizing not just the 30-day assessment. So their decision is not just based on using the CANS or the CASI, but is a comprehensive lens of interviewing the youth, of interviewing caretakers, relatives, meeting with that child's permanency team, reviewing any other existing documentations, evaluations, and assessments that are of relevance, and comprehensively looking at this information and really then making a determination as to whether or not the child's needs can be met outside of a congregate care setting, or if they require a QRTP level of care. You can, Renee. Once that 30-day assessment has been completed, there is also a requirement within the Family First legislation that there is a court review of that determination that has been made by the qualified individual. Again, this does need to occur within the 60-day within the 60-day time frame. Otherwise, there is an impact for 4E reimbursement as well. The judge has the discretion of either approving or disproving the decision of the QI, and there, depending on what occurs, there are a number of paths that then can happen, whether it is if the judge is approved, then the child remains. If the judge does not approve, then how to transition that child from that QRTP into a program that is able to meet their needs. In those instances where the QI determines that that child does require a QRTP level of care, and the judge does sign off, does approve that that stay as well, then the next time, then it creates what's called the long stayer review. That's another requirement within the legislation, that at a certain threshold, there needs to be what's called a long stay review. And this is, you know, parts of the checks and balances. We, again, you know, we recognize that there are some children for which there is a need for this level of intervention, but again, we want it to be short-term and specific and meet their needs within the time frame that needs to occur. And so with the long stayers review, that the legislation sets parameters. So for a child that's 13, that's younger than 13, that long stayer threshold occurs within 6 months of their placement within that QRTP, that there must be a review of their progress and a determination as to whether or not there is a continued treatment need for them to remain in that QRTP. And that review process entails approval by the commissioner. So in any circumstance where a district is seeking for a child to remain in a QRTP beyond that long stayer threshold, it does require a review and approval by the commissioner. And as part of that, we are developing a process as to how that long stayer review will be facilitated in New York State. Just as it's noted here on the slide, that long stayer review threshold for youth that are 13 and older is 12 months consecutive or 18 months non-consecutive. And again, for a youth that's that's under the age of 13, that threshold is 6 months consecutive or 12 months non-consecutive.
Thanks, Gail. I'm just going to confirm, was Becky able to join us?
I'm here. Are you able to hear me, Renee?
I can hear you. The only thing I'll say is once in a blue moon, I get a little message that my Wi-Fi is a little unstable. I don't know why. I'm plugged in all over the place, but if for some reason that happens, you have my apologies, and I'm sure Becky can carry forward, probably even without the slides, but let's hope that doesn't happen.
So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Becky Colman. I work with both Renee and Gail. I sit in our Office of Strategic Planning and Policy Development within OCFS. And with Renee, have had the pleasure of really getting to work on the optional part, as she mentioned, of Families First, which focuses on prevention and preventive services. So what's really exciting about what Families First does is that it opens in a new way federal funding for prevention services that we just haven't seen before. So there are some restrictions around those dollars that I'll get into in a moment, but it's really the first time where we have seen sort of an open-ended funding stream for prevention. And what it says is that states that have an approved prevention plan can put in and claim for up to 50% reimbursement when we are providing in-home parenting, substance abuse, and mental health services to what the feds are referring to as candidates for foster care. And again, we'll get into that in a little more detail in a moment, and their caregivers, or a child who's in foster care and is pregnant or is currently parenting would also be eligible to receive these services and to have reimbursement provided. So it really opens up a lot of doors for us. We're thinking about what we can offer in terms of prevention services and who we can offer them to. Now, in order to be able to draw down these prevention funds, the state does need to have a prevention plan. As Renee mentioned, we are not eligible to be considered for a prevention plan until we are implementing our Families First congregate care provisions. So that will be in September of this year. We are currently working on our plan. We need to outline for over a 5-year period what we think our prevention services would look like. So we need to describe who our target population is, how we're going to define candidates for foster care, which programs and services we're hoping to offer, how they're going to be implemented, what the state's going to do to monitor and evaluate that those programs are being provided as intended, and are hopefully achieving the outcomes that we're all looking for, namely that children are able to stay safely at home with their caregivers and not need to enter into foster care. So that prevention plan hasn't been submitted yet, but it will be going in soon. As part of it, we need to, as I mentioned, define who our target population will be. We are interested in going as broad and as upstream as possible with our definition. So what we are planning to propose at this point in time is that any child who is part of a non-mandated or mandated preventive services case and their caregivers would be eligible to be part of Families First as long as they could benefit from the receipt of a parenting, mental health, or substance abuse program. So you notice we bulleted out here 3 of the groups for caregivers. I think one of the things we are also most excited about is that in addition to including parents, Families First is very interested in helping to prevent disruptions in other caregiving arrangements. So if a child has already left home and is living with a kinship caregiver, and there's a possibility that that situation is going to be not sustainable without the additional support services. We can offer services to that kinship caregiver at the same time as to the parent and to the child. If their child has already been adopted and there's a concern that that adoption might disrupt, there's an opportunity to wrap these types of prevention services around those families and to receive that reimbursement. So a big piece and one of the limitations of Families First is that we can only claim for evidence-based programs, or what we call EBPs, that have been rated and approved by the Federal Clearinghouse. So I would say this is probably one of the most common misconceptions we hear when we are talking with different audiences. People hear prevention program, they hear evidence-based, and they make a couple of assumptions. One, we've heard many parties who think that this is New York State that gets to make the decision about what's an evidence-based program. That's not the case. The Federal Clearinghouse has been set up to solicit interested programs who think they have enough of it of an evidence base that they can show a model and fidelity and research studies that show their impacts. Those get reviewed by the Clearinghouse and rated. As New York State, we get to pick from that menu of programs that have been approved, which ones we think would work best for our children and families and include them in our plan, but we are limited to picking from that menu that they have approved. As you can see here, it's been a long process for the Clearinghouse. They do a very thorough vetting job of these programs. We actually have, this bullet should be updated a little bit. They just announced a few more programs last week that had been approved. So currently there are 21 mental health programs that have been rated as either promising, supported, or well supported, 8 substance abuse oriented programs, and 13 that fall into parenting. I should say some of those programs overlap. There are some programs that have been approved for use with mental health, substance abuse, and parenting. They have a wide range, but that's the group that we are looking at. So what are some of the impacts for you all to be thinking about in terms of the prevention side? I think when we're talking about foster parents, when we're talking about adoptive homes, as Renee was laying out at the beginning, and I think Gail was walking through as well, we have those 2 big goals. We're looking to be taking children out of congregate care if we think they can be served successfully at a lower level of care, and to hopefully have more children who are going to be in foster homes and therapeutic foster homes. So as we look to move those children out of congregate care settings, thinking about who they are, what their needs are, and what supports they might need to have around them to be successful in a home-based setting. We're also really looking obviously at our adoptive homes. We're hoping to have a 1 home, 1 family type of policy. We know from research that's out there that those home-based settings tend to be more successful, work better for children and their families when we have 1 family group instead of multiple within a home. So to help make all of this possible and to support, again, recruitment of kinship caregivers, to increase our number of children who are not just living outside of congregate care, but who are living with kin, we're really trying to encourage our counties to be even more data-driven and informed than they have been in the past. To really think about targeting their recruitment strategies to match the specific needs of their counties and their communities. And so there's a few things we've done to help do that. And then if you're interested in this, I would encourage you to go to the website that's at the bottom of the slide here. We've been putting out quite a bit of data and offering technical assistance to the counties and the agencies who are interested in working through that data with us. One packet is our foster home data packet. That takes a look at an individual county level basis on what foster homes in that county look like. So it provides some statistics about how many foster homes do you have where you have 1 family per home? How many of the foster homes in your county are actually active? And by that we mean we do see some foster parents who become certified, who are eligible to take children, but maybe haven't cared for a child in a long period of time. So we define active homes as a home that has provided at least 1 day of care within the last 6 months. That's included in those data packets. Information about the median length of stay of service. So how often do the foster families in your county serve as a foster parent from the time they're certified to sort of when they exit? It looks at those families who go through the whole process of getting certified, but then never end up taking a child, and how many of them fall into that group. What are their characteristics? As well as looking at the actual placement of children in the home and how often we're seeing like transfers to other foster homes or to higher levels of care. On the congregate care side, we have something that we call the bubble charts. As we're looking to reduce our congregate care population, we've provided data over the last 3 years on who are the children who come in to congregate care, who comes in as a brand new admission where that's their first stop when they're admitted to foster care, who are the children who were initially placed in a foster home, whether that be therapeutic or a straight foster home, and who stepped up into congregate care. And you can see information again by county, how many children fall into those two sort of pathways, what are their characteristics, what do we know about them in terms of their age, their demographics. Really hoping that that can help to drive some conversations again about how we examine the practices that lead to children being at one level of care or another, and what are the supports that are needed to try and keep children out of congregate care and in foster homes. And I saw the question in the chat. I think someone moved it over, but yes, what's on the slide deck there is where you can go to find those data packets if you're interested. And knowing we had just an hour, I think we've kept it to under that. So we have time for questions. If there's anything you all would like to know more about on either the QRTP or the prevention side, we welcome you to unmute or put it in the chat.
There's a few in the chat. This is Amy. Hi. I can read those first if you want. I guess you answered one already about being classified as a QRPT. And then I think you answered the rollout is September 29th.
Yes, so Family First becomes effective in New York State, September 29th, 2021. We have provided a guidance document to the field for those agencies that are considering being a QRTP or QRTP exceptions. That provides the framework of policies, procedures, documentation that they would need to submit. And we've identified July, the beginning of July, as a timeframe that we'll begin reviewing those applications that are submitted.
Great, thank you. And then there's another one. It says, does this include diagnostic programs? Specifically, will diagnostic programs provide the 6-month post-discharge support?
So would that diagnostic program meet the requirements for a QRTP? That would really be the question. So when you think about what the legislation speaks to in regards to being a QRTP, being able to, you're accredited, you're providing the trauma-informed model, you have the nursing and clinical requirements, being able to provide discharge planning, those are all of the criteria to take into consideration. And so if just from a programmatic standpoint, that your program would not be able to meet that criteria, then there would not be the alignment of what the legislation requires to be a QRTP. But if a program is a QRTP, then yes, that 6 months of aftercare is a requirement.
Thank you. Let's see,
You're
the
welcome.
next one is, will kinship homes be prepped with therapeutic parenting training?
So funny you asked that. Renee, I see you about to, I'll let you go.
No, go.
No, I was going to say that actually Renee, Becky, and I are in a work group, and this is one of the areas that we are very much reviewing right now is looking at the current guidance for therapeutic foster homes, and where there is an opportunity to provide additional guidance, and really we're very much focused on trauma-informed lens and clinical supports, and really how to bolster those supports as it pertains to therapeutic foster parents. So what are the additional training that we can identify to help really that therapeutic foster parents, who we really see as an integral part of the treatment team for that child, how to ensure that they're feeling equipped, that they're feeling supported, that they feel that they have the level of training that is needed to really help support the needs of a youth that's that has been placed in their home. And so that has been a central part of the conversation that we've been having in this group. And I certainly invite Renee and Becky if there's anything else that they want to add to that.
I don't, Gail. I think you did a nice job of providing that info.
And Gail, thank you for sharing that. I went on a 2.5-year sabbatical to the state of Connecticut, where I worked as a Wendy's Wonderful Kids recruiter, and I got assigned to a population of kids that were in congregate care facilities, and many of them had people that they knew very well that would have made excellent and did make excellent therapeutic foster parents, and they qualified also under the idea of kin. So I think that's an excellent area that you're looking at, because I think that's going to help a lot of the young people, especially dropping down to 370, by actually bringing in new people into our system who can get the therapeutic training and being a real resource for our kids as they're stepping down into families that already know and care about them, that will also be therapeutic. So I'm delighted that you guys are looking into that.
Thank you, Pat. Absolutely. And, you know, when we think about kinship caregivers, oftentimes this is not a field that they have sort of stepped into in terms of, you know, looking to apply to be a caregiver, a foster parent. In many instances, they are responding to an immediate need. And so there is a recognition of, you know, making sure that we are providing those supports. And someone said, you know, about the trauma training. I saw that chat pop up in the chat. Absolutely. Because again, you know, just by virtue of a child being removed from their home, that is a level of trauma in addition to whatever other trauma has been experienced. And then for a kinship resource, being able to support their relative in that. So absolutely, that's a lens we're applying here.
Excellent.
Great. Thank you again. There's a couple more. If you want me to keep going, I can. I guess the next question is, how does this affect CSE placements?
That is a very good question. So I will say this, that, you know, CSE students are not in the care and custody of the local commissioner. That being said, based on the Family First legislation, if a child is placed in a QRTP program, it triggers those requirements of the 30-day assessment and the 60-day court review. So this is an area that we are really looking at providing guidance in regards to an awareness of the impact of a CSE child that is placed in a QRTP program.
Okay, let me see. Let me scroll down a little bit. I shared your link for the data, so everybody has that. Let's see. Oh, what will happen to agencies that don't become QRTPs?
So then they are categorized as a non-specified program. And for those agencies that are specified as that are categorized as a non-specified program, a 4E reimbursement for an eligible child would be maximum of 14 days for that placement. So a child that is placed in a program that's categorized as non-specified would only be eligible for up to 14 days of 4E reimbursement if they meet the eligibility requirements for 4E.
Guardianship, let's see. And then there's I guess this is kind of related to this. Are there any facilities that would automatically be enrolled in this program due to their current status?
No, all programs, whether QRTP or QRTP exceptions, would need to submit a application, if you will, in order to be approved to provide that program.
Great. Thank you again, Gail. I think I hit all the questions. Let's see. Let's see. There are some questions if you want to read them. One of the statements was that would be great to mention at the court administrative group. KinGap would help these can have more support all around. Hopefully Kin will get guardianship. Then they can have the support of the RPCs, trauma training. You touched on that. I don't see any more questions. So if I neglected your question, please unmute and ask or pop it in the chat and I'd be happy to read it to our guests. I think I got them all. Scrolling back through.
Well,
I don't know if anybody has any more questions. Pat, do you have any questions?
well, is there anything that, because of time, you didn't share with us that you'd like to over the next 5 or 10 minutes? Renee or Gail or Becky?
This is Becky. I guess we should also add, Renee, right? Families First funding does also open up, has a special component that speaks to kinship programs and kinship supports, and also makes some federal dollars available there for supporting approved kinship programs. The challenge that's been happening on that side is so far a few of the kinship programs have submitted to the clearinghouse to be reviewed, and none of them have yet to be rated as meeting any of the evidence levels. So that's an area I think across the nation that's being looked at about how to work with our federal partners on that for either building evidence base or looking at the level of requirements that are there. But it is another piece of the Families First legislation that I think is as exciting, of making federal dollars at least theoretically available for programs that support kin caregivers.
You know, Pat, the only other thing that I would want to say is really our thank you to all of those on today's call who are foster and adoptive parents. This work can't be done without all of you. And, you know, we so recognize that our foster adoptive parents really are the backbone of our program. And without you, we couldn't do what work that needs to be done. And so again, thank you. And I think you all know that we continue to advocate for additional recruitment of foster and adoptive parents. If you know of anyone who would like to become a foster and adoptive parents, you know, making referrals to either the local Department of Social Services or any of the other voluntary agencies is so greatly appreciated. And for those of you who provide training to other foster and adoptive parents or mentor them, please know how much that is appreciated. And of course, to Pat and Amy and all of your staff, Pat, we are so thankful for all that you do for the foster and adoptive families as well. And it's always a pleasure to be able to spend time with you. And thank all of you for waiting for us to do our presentation on a Friday from 3 to 4. I'm sure most of you were thinking, what are we thinking? But we're very appreciative that you allowed us to come and talk with you.
And we are delighted all three of you made it because you really informed us very well. And we thank you for taking the time.
No, it's our pleasure.
Hi,
Yeah,
this is,
thank you.
oops, I'm sorry. I was typing out a question and I'm not a very fast typer, so it didn't make the list, I think. But I supervise a kinship caregivers program. We've supported kinship caregivers for more than 10 years. And although the counties that we serve seem to be getting better at encouraging the caregivers to become foster parents, we still are encountering counties that discourage it openly. And I'm wondering what, I think it's going to be really important as this gets implemented to really educate and train the counties that that's a viable option.
Yes.
It gets discouraged. We had a case this week where 3 children had been with their grandmother for several months and had wanted to become a foster parent, was discouraged by the county to do that. And they went and sought another grandmother and it encouraged her to petition to place the children under an Article 6. And they were saying, well, we can't afford more foster children.
Yeah.
That's why I reported the family that reported to us. And that was very discouraging to us. So I'm not sure what can be done about that, but I think it's an education issue. And I hope it gets addressed.
So when I hear those things, it's unacceptable that a county is providing that message.
Yeah.
And so it's really important for us at OCFS to hear that and to know what county that is so we can provide them with technical assistance. And I don't want to put you in the middle of any of this. So if you are willing to share with Pat, when you're hearing these things, Pat can certainly send that information along to me, and we will have our regional offices reach out to the county and work with them as to why they are providing that message.
Yeah.
And
Actually, we
Priscilla,
did refer this family to the regional office and hopefully, they'll be working together, but it's very discouraging.
well, thank you for bringing it up and keep the fight on because OCFS and you and us are on the same side on this issue.
Would you put Pat's email back up, please? I don't.
I'll throw it
It's
in.
in there. It's in the box. It's in the box.
I'm assuming the Pat you're referring to is me. Is that correct?
Yes.
It is. I put your
Okay.
email in the
Oh,
chat.
there it is. Yeah, thank you.
I'm trying to stay one step ahead. I was going to put the OCFS regional office link too. I'm trying to work fast for everybody.
Thank you.
I wanted to comment as well, like that happens also, like I work in the regional permanency centers and that happens in our local DSS when it comes to guardianship. Most of families that I work with that have foster care, they're never told about guardianship and they may
Right.
not want to adopt. So I have to constantly educate like everybody and their brother in my counties. And I thought with Family First, that was going to be a choice that was discussed by OCF with the local DSS, and it's not happening in most of the 5 counties that I work with. So I was just curious on what the plans for that was happening.
Well, we've certainly done a lot of education with our counties around the whole kin gap. But again, if that's not happening, we need to know about it. And we will reach out directly to the county. And I know sometimes it puts people in the middle of not wanting to indicate who they are. And I appreciate that. And we don't always need to know who it is. We just need to know that it's occurring. And we will follow up with the county. If that family is willing to talk with us directly, we certainly will reach out and have that conversation with them and get as many specifics as possible. But it is unacceptable that they're saying that they will not provide those as options.
And if it is indeed true that they're not doing it to save money, I'm hoping that when September 29th comes around, it'll actually be cheaper for them to do the right thing. Whereas as of now, it doesn't seem to be. But we'll keep our fingers crossed on that one too.
So my experience when this has happened in the local DSS, they usually tell them that custody is higher than guardianship and you don't want to do guardianship. So for custody, and the problem is with a lot of these grandparents that are raising their grandkids, or I just had one I enrolled a couple months ago, an aunt, she's so overwhelmed. You know, I educated about guardianship and she went and got it and got in our program. But, you know,
Nice.
that's happening. Like, it breaks my heart when you go, a grandparent calls you and then you can't help them because they have custody and, you know, they were steered away, not only DSS, but the courts are doing it as well. So I don't know what to do about it. It just constantly breaks my heart.
Well,
Well, I put the regional office links in there. If someone wants to start with their regional OCFS person, I put the directory in, and you know, you can always come through us at AFFCNY. You can reach out to Pat, you can talk to me. Some of you know one or both of us here, and then we can start fielding that information for you to Renee and her team. That is fine as well.
all right.
Thanks, Amy.
Sure.
Well, once again, thank you so much for spending the hour with us. And we got our 5 minutes back anyway, so I appreciate it.
Good. All right. Have a good weekend, everybody.
All right, thank you.
Yes.
Bye.
Thank
Thank you
you.
all.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
everybody.
Have a great weekend.